Cricket Podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Cricket Podcast, where they've done it again. Australia have conquered the world, broken the hearts of 1.4 billion Indians and countless other people, taken home the trophy that we still don't know the name of, secured the World Cup. I'm Jack Hope. I'm joined by Max Rowe Brown. How you doing, Max?
Yeah, good. We could suggest a name for the trophy.
The Pat Cummins Trophy. Ross, what do you think of that?
Yeah, delightful. We're fitting for a man who has conquered pretty much everything this year. Racism, misogyny, classism, climate change, and now has not only won the World Test Championship, he's also won the ODI World Cup as well. Phenomenal, really.
Yeah, it is. We'll be talking about the Cricket World Cup final. Of course, we'll be celebrating Australia, commiserating with India, talking about the big moments, the head catch, the head 100, mainly Travis Head, and some other stuff along the way. Ross, you can go first. What's your general impression of the Cricket World Cup final? It's over. That's my impression.
That top quality analysis is what kept us going for the last 5 years, isn't it, really? My reflection on that is that India got their game plan wrong today and Australia got theirs right. I thought Australia outplayed India in pretty much every single facet. They were absolutely brilliant in the field. The bowling plans that they had were spectacular. And you saw it where the ball was hooping around in the hands of Bumrah and Shami. It was difficult, one, to control the swing, because as you saw with a couple of wides here and there, but surviving some of those Bumrah overs was just so challenging. And you saw today that them going out, trying to be positive, trying to set the tone, trying to get kind of 50 runs off of that total very early on was clearly what their plan was. And then they're going to have the ballast in the middle overs to get through it. And yeah, I was really impressed with Australia today. And yeah, there's no controversy, unfortunately, for people to hold on to. There's nothing like that. Ultimately, Australia have turned up and done what Australia always do. They win World Cup finals.
It's a good summary. Max, can you tell us what happened in the game?
I can. So the first thing, the toss, there was some interesting discussion around that. Pat Cummins elected to bowl first. A lot of people said that was a very brave decision. I'm sure we'll cover the toss afterwards, but that's what happened. That's how the game started. And Rohit came out and he did his usual. He fired off fifth gear from the get-go, absolutely soared into, well, it was an outrageously quick 50. Was it the quickest 50 in ODI World Cup finals ever? But despite starting in fifth gear, his car did hit a manhole cover that was slightly loose, robbing him of his early advantage. And that seemed to break the clutch on the Indian car, because at that point, they weren't able to get out of first gear for the remainder of the innings and basically sauntered their way to 240. They just never recovered from those three early wickets, despite the best efforts of Virat Kohli. I think he did a pretty good job in those middle overs, but no one else really managed to keep the rate up with him, and 240 was the score. But it was a slow pitch, so we thought there was definitely skin in the game still for India. Australia, as we mentioned beforehand, the power play, all important for them, and Warner and Head came out swinging, trying to get themselves into as big of a head start as they could before the middle overs where things got a bit tight. Travis Head played and missed about 15 times. Jasprit Bumrah, David Warner fell. Mitch Marsh fell. Steve Smith fell on his own sword, employing the tried and tested sacrifice tactic to ultimately see Australia through. But, in all of this, there's obviously one man that stands head and shoulders above everyone else. No pun intended, because Marnus Labuschagne absolutely embodied the cure for insomnia in this particular effort. He bored the Indians into a stupor to the point that they didn't know where to look. And I think we have to acknowledge the importance of Marnus Labuschagne's 58 off 110 in this chase. It was an astounding display of blocking in an ODI. But
no run.
At the other end, of course, Travis Head, absolutely phenomenal. I mean, we saw a few pretty impressive hundreds in the semi-finals. This one knocks them all out of the park. What a display from him to win the game for his team, win the World Cup for Australia. And as you said, Jack, break the hearts of many people, because no one likes seeing Australia win World Cups, do they?
To be honest,
well, Australians do. Yeah.
In the last hour, I did. I was quite late to the bandwagon here, but I did want them to win. I was pretty neutral the whole way through the game, and then the commentary just got ridiculous. It was like they were commentating on a state funeral, not a cricket match. I mean, it should have been a really good story. It was an underdog victory in front of, I think it was 92,000 people, the official attendance. Two of the great teams facing up against each other for their second final this year, and the coming together again of what has been one of the more interesting rivalries in world cricket over the last few years. And it wasn't like that at all. It was just like, it was a bit pathetic. It was,
well, maybe they were all a bit distracted because they all had to rewrite their post-match eulogies. I'm sure they spent a lot of time last night writing some really nicely crafted lines that they could all say in the hope of getting the soundbite at the end of the
exactly.
Final, and then had to redraft.
This is why I was happy Australia won. This is why eventually, in the last hour, I was like, yeah, go on, Travis, hit him again. Ross, I'm going to say this as well. I think best team won on the day. Might not be the best team overall, but I think there's no debate whatsoever that Australia deserved this World Cup victory.
Yeah, no, I think so. And again, this is the beauty of knockout cricket. If it was just a league format, India were by far and away the best team in the tournament. Unbeaten, going through into this final and played some brilliant cricket. Here, I think Australia just showed what they can always do, and they've got some good brains trusts. They kept on panning around to who was on the bench, right? Andy Flower was there, serial trophy winner. You got Daniel Vettori in that space. You look at what's happened to Adam Zampa in this tournament, and then you've obviously got Cumdog and all of his merry men around him. And I thought that today, everything that they tried to do came off. And you look at their tournament, and I think some of the decisions they've taken were difficult ones, but they were the right ones. You had Josh English coming in for Alex Carey, which would have been a difficult call, I think. They really like Alex Carey, but it was the right decision. They didn't select a replacement for Travis Head and said, no, we're going to give the guy a bit more time. And that's been completely vindicated today. So from a strategic point of view, from a World Cup perspective, they've done really well, especially after all the pressure of losing their first couple of games. And then today, tactically, they got things spot on. The toss decision, the way in which they went around limiting their scoring options for India, their fielding was absolutely exceptional. I think probably 25 runs saved. I don't know, it's quite a difficult thing to put.
I mean, the Rohit catch alone, right?
Yeah,
it's a great catch to get there, but that's probably the biggest individual moment of the match, isn't it? Like,
it's huge. And Rohit, right?
It's fielding.
Rohit was brilliant. Rohit again, like, going out and setting that tone. But I don't mean to kind of go on about someone like KL Rahul, but I mean, the pitch wasn't brilliant. Let's be fair. It's not, but it was good enough to score some runs on, and they decided not to hit any runs. I couldn't really believe what I was looking at for a team trying to set a competitive total.
It wasn't just the lack of a boundary, was it, in that middle period? It was the lack of actually attempting to hit a boundary. It was a bit, it was bizarre. I could see the need to sort of rebuild a bit. Right after those 3 wickets fell, Rohit had gone 80 for 2, 80 for 3 after the power play in the end. So I mean, you're already ahead of the game. You can very safely take 10 overs to regroup, get yourself in, get a measure of the pitch. Absolutely no problem with that. Kohli did that, and he was doing it at a strike rate of like 90 odd, slowed down a bit towards the end. But while he was doing that brilliantly. KL Rahul at the other end obviously choked things up a little bit. But it was the fact that once Kohli was out, you then needed the guy who had been in and got a measure of the pitch to take control and kick on and start looking for the scoring options. And that never happened.
Nope.
I don't know, he was just, whether he was relying on Jadeja to come in and do it, or anyone else to come in and do it, or just he had a bad day, or there are different reasons that you can find for it. But essentially, that the fact that they didn't kick on after that rebuilding phase has cost them enough runs to put more pressure on the Australian side, and not enough in the end.
I agree, because it allowed Marnus to bat as Marnus batted.
Yeah.
Right. Ultimately, allowed him to drop anchor and allowed someone at the other end to do a little bit more. So it gave Australia the advantage in that space. This is probably the other side to it. Australia had a great game plan. India's game plan, they switched it up. Like, after finding a winning formula throughout the tournament, they switched things up today, and they were rattled, I think, by the Australians. I think that's kind of what it came down to. You saw them change the batting lineup, and whether you think that's a good or a bad thing, I can understand them wanting to get Suryakumar Yadav in a little bit later on to do some hits. Suryakumar Yadav cannot bat with a tail. It was an absolute disaster class in how to manage what was in that space. Jadeja is better at doing that and has demonstrated that in a number of occasions. And then you also saw up front, India get a little bit greedy, I thought. They saw the ball was moving around. It gave Shami the ball. But ultimately, it meant that Siraj was a little bit toothless, right? They were pretty much carrying a number 11 who then is not going to bowl his kind of full quota of overs and not be as attacking. They may as well, if they were going to go with that, they may as well have picked Shardul Thakur if they wanted another batter in that lineup, or Ravi Ashwin. And I think it was a pretty poor piece of captaincy from Rohit Sharma, who has been brilliant throughout this tournament, other than in this game on that front.
Yeah, I thought it was an odd one from India. I think you're right, Ross. I think when you say Australia were tactically spot on, they were. All their bowling plans. Obviously, the batting sort of took care of itself after that little flurry of wickets. But India, I mean, even relegating Siraj to first change and having Shami bowl with the
second change in the end, he came on.
Exactly. Yeah. That's mixing up what had worked really quite effectively for
9 games in a row. They won.
And actually, to be perfectly honest, Shami wasn't very good. Like, he couldn't control the ball. He bowled loads of wides. That's not necessarily playing to his strength. So I mean, I thought that was.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's taken 23 wickets coming as the first change. Well, it's 20 because one was today, wasn't it? So I was like, the 23 came as first change. Siraj has the odd day where it hasn't gone for him, but in the main has been really good, and obviously is more in need of a swinging ball to be effective. So I agree. I thought that was a really bizarre call. I also thought sending Jadeja in earlier was a slightly odd one, because it gave Australia the opportunity to get another couple of overs out of Glenn Maxwell with an off spinner against the left-hander. Whereas if Suryakumar Yadav are coming and Jadeja was coming in towards the end, maybe they have to risk bowling off spinner at Sky, and that's not really something you want to have to do. So they gave sort of Australia a bit of an out, I suppose. Yeah. I think that's a really good point, Max. To be honest, I just think they made a few stupid decisions. I mean, like, all of that, taking all of that into consideration, let's go back to him. KL Rahul played an absolute stinker. You cut 107 balls, hit one boundary.
It's a disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace. And literally, there's been one thing we've been pretty consistent about the whole podcast we've done this, right? KL Rahul is a bit of an idiot. I think that really, really talented. Really talented. Like, the guy, it can be one of the most supreme batters of his generation, right? Absolute idiot today.
I mean, fundamentally, you have to come to the conclusion that he probably doesn't understand what his job is. He's just sort of accidentally got good
for as long as possible. Knock out. No, you need to hit some runs, mate. Try and hit some boundaries.
I don't know. I know it was tough. It clearly it was going to be a pitch where sort of 250 would have been a very competitive score, and where did they end up? 240. So it's not completely ludicrous. He hasn't got like 10 of 107 or something like that, but. You face 107 balls on that pitch, you've got to be walking off with 80. I think. I think that would be a fair contribution there, and he just never really seemed like he was interested in doing that. I think in the middle 30 overs, India scored 120 runs, which is
they did a boundary for 16 overs.
That's really poor. To only score 120 runs. What's that, Max? 4 and over.
4 and over, yeah.
The bulk of the slightly easier bit.
So basically, because 240 was what they ended on. They ended the power play on 80. didn't they? So they scored 8 and over for 10 overs, and then 4 and over for 40.
Yeah, and then got 40 off the last year. And I mean, like, I just sort of mystifying why they decided to go about it, or why he specifically decided to go about it the way he did.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
and I think that's
you
probably
can throw things out there. You can say it was the pressure of the occasion, playing safe, reverting to type. You know, there was almost a sense, I thought, of like, let's take as much risk out of it and have a chance in the game, even if it's less than 50-50, than taking a few more risks and having, you know, a chance of actually posting a score that Australia are really going to struggle to get. And, you know, basically it's like, okay, our bowlers need to bail us out. There was a lack of ambition, I think.
Yeah,
I think that's fair. And I think so. If we were to channel our inner Dan Weston, who we are sending our very well wishes to at this point, we love you, Dan. He would say that how much pressure is KL Rahul putting on the rest of the batters in that lineup? And I think that's the big thing here, right? And it just sets a really negative tone throughout this, and yeah, they just never truly recover from that part. And then when it gets to the tail coming in, they know what their weakness is, right? They know they need to protect because they've got like 4 genuine number 10, number 11s in that piece, and it was just bananas, I thought.
Yeah, I mean it was. Yeah, there's no other way of putting it. And then to get out in the 40th over or the 41st over, it was just sort of chef's kiss for the whole thing. Like, waste all that time. don't even do the bit at the end to like
fiddling at one outside off stump, not even trying to score it runs.
Yeah, just like exactly. Didn't even go for the big shot. Managed to snick off with one of those white balls on the deadest pitch in history, to get himself out when it was sort of time to launch, and kind of also in at a point in the game that was. It sort of felt a little bit too late to get Sky in, or it felt a little bit like Sky came in a bit late. That's what I thought anyway. But although
muddle. It was all a bit Pep Guardiola Champions League final. You know, you've got an all-conquering team that's beaten everyone in doing this. You know, with your normal 11, and then suddenly you've decided you're going to play Demichelis and holding midfield for no apparent reason. It's all gone to shit. Just,
That's a very niche football to reference that one, Matt. To bring in
Demichelis final. Champions League final. I mean, it's not that niche, is it? It's not like I started talking about AFC Wimbledon selection headaches. That would be niche. At least people have heard of Demichelis is. Boys. Go on.
I was going to say, and that as well, like 240, they weren't out the game as well. The Indian bowling has been so good right through this tournament. Actually, at the halfway stage, India had a good chance of winning it.
Yeah, I mean, like I think that's I mean, that is true. But India went into the match, Ross, as a 70% favourite to win the game, and batted in a way that made the game 50-50 at half time, which is a testament to sort of two things, really. Like, one, how bad a job they did. Two, well, maybe three things. Two, how well Australia did, and we should probably talk about them a little bit more. We'll do that in part 2. And three, testament to how good the Indian bowling attack is, because 240 against them was going to be a challenge. We're going to take a break, and then we will come back and we will discuss some of the talking points from the second innings. We should probably talk about some of the Australian bowling. I mean, like, you know, it's fun to go in heavy on King Legend, but you know, he's
I want to talk about Mitch Marsh's 2 overs for 5.
Yeah, and Travis Head's 2 overs for 4. Huge moments in this cricket match. Just a reminder that to everyone listening or watching, do hit like and do hit subscribe. Numbers are a little bit lower on this episode than they could have been had the result been slightly different. But it's great to have anyone along who is listening or watching. And thanks for joining us
in the live comments.
Thanks for joining us for the World Cup. Like, we've enjoyed doing the coverage. It's been a pleasure interacting with everybody. Stick around, because there's a 5-match T20 series between India and Australia starting on Friday, and I can't think of a better thing to move on to.
How much pain of the Indian fans having to be in there? Like, that is brutal, isn't it? To literally be up against your slayer at the end of it. We'll be back in like 5 seconds. Well, this rate. So.
Yeah.
You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Cricket Podcast. Max, you're good at credit. Australia, we mentioned that they got it right. They did get it really, really right with the ball. Were you impressed by their bowling performance? I'm assuming you were. What impressed you the most?
Yeah, well, it was obviously the first thing. I mean, the fielding, backing up the bowling was so good, cutting off the boundaries. Any time you got a sense that there was a sniff that India were about to finally pick up a boundary, someone came hurtling around to stop it. But the plans, the way they set everything out, the basically the controlling of singles, you can compare the two teams and how that went. Basically, both were in a situation where after the power play, things had got a little bit rocky, and it was a case of how can we tighten things up a little bit with the spinners on and that side of things, taking pace off the ball. India found it so much harder to score singles than Australia did. Australia were able to knock it around, score 4-5 and over really comfortably, and India really weren't. And I think part of that was the way they bowled to KL Rahul, because Virat Kohli wasn't really struggling with taking the singles because he was able to do it anywhere in the ring. Like he'd knock it into the leg side, knock it into the offside. He was in control. But Australia, that absolutely suited them. That was all happy. They were happy for that to happen. Like, let Kohli get a single, and we'll try and tie down KL Rahul. Just sort of pack out the offside a bit, so that when he tries to cut it away, there's two guys there, and he didn't have an answer to it. Essentially, the discipline. The word finally came to my mind. The discipline they bowled with was astounding. Just on the spot, mixing it up, slower balls, cutters. They had a plan and they executed the plan perfectly. They mixed things up as well. I mean, bringing on Mitchell Marsh those couple of overs turned out to be a stroke of genius, and then that gives you so much more flexibility towards the end to move things around as well with the bowlers you want to use at the right time. So when Starc came back and taking wickets, that went to plan as well. It was everything Pat Cummins did today sort of came to fruition. He had a bit of a Midas touch with his decisions, but part of that is just with how well Australia bowled and how tight they were with their lines and disciplined with their plans. So you have to, as much as we can rag on KL Rahul for being shit today, costing his team a bit, Australia did make it really hard for him. And he didn't have an answer, so you do have to give him a small bit of, I guess, a get out clause.
What I respect most about Pat Cummins, I think, in this game is how he used himself to bowl at the easy batters. And as a captain, I think that is
just true captain.
something that I can appreciate. Yeah, Mitchell Starc, Hazlewood, Maxwell, sacrifice them up front. Their figures don't look so good. Bring yourself on. Pocket a nice 2 for 34 in your World Cup final. That's
those nice two wickets. He got the very easy wicket of Virat Kohli, didn't he? With his in his 10.
Don't bring facts into this. No, he did it. He did a really good job, I thought. I think as well. Cricket is a game of conditions, as we often say on this podcast, and a large element of that is being able to solve problems and work out the best bowling plan on the fly. That's part of the magic of the game, if you like. And in this match, I think a large amount of what we're saying you can distill down into Australia just solving that problem much better than India did. India didn't have a plan for scoring on the wicket. Their bowling plans were not as effective, particularly once the ball got a little bit older. Whereas Australia, through ruthlessly exploiting short, slower deliveries, basically, were able to.
The Stuart Broad captaincy approach is his.
It was, yeah. I was at one point. I was like, "Am I watching England in 2012 in the West Indies?" No, was the answer, but. It was. I think basically they did a better job. Now, part of that, obviously, if you're bowling first, you're trying to limit the opposition. There's no reverse scoreboard pressure, if you like. If you're India in the second innings, you're not able to necessarily go to short, slow bouncers in the 12th over of the game because they're not amazing wicket-taking deliveries. You still have to hunt for wickets in that scenario. But yeah, that's the benefit you get if you bowl well. So well done, Australia, on that. As I wanted to be.
And it's an example of why it's so hard to set a score on a slow pitch, isn't it? Because suddenly that slow ball becomes a wicket-taking delivery because the onus is on you to try and score the runs.
Yes,
if that's the route you want to take, of course. The other option is to not try and score the runs and play it safe.
Ross, what did you think of the pitch? We suspected there might be a little bit of shenanigans in terms of what surface was prepared, and I got the impression, although I don't think it was ever explicitly stated, like with the semi-final, that India got probably what they wanted out of the surface. My take on that is that it was a bit stupid. Like, if you're the better cricket team, which I think Australia are, India are, you want as neutral a conditions as possible so that your skill edge is, usable. You don't want something weird like slower bouncers.
Losing the toss.
Yeah, like to get in the way of your victory parade. Am I reading that wrong, or am I being a conspiracy theorist on that?
I'm not sure I'd back that kind of India intervened and all this kind of stuff. Like, if they did, kind of, it's just a bit stupid, as you say. And I don't think this team have been stupid. I think they've been quite clever throughout this tournament. They've done really well. Today, they got things wrong, but that kind of happens. I thought the pitch was a shit heap, if I'm perfectly honest, but it made for kind of this dogged cricket. Like, it's not going to be like World Cup finals are typically boring affairs. We've been a little bit spoilt, like with the kind of Lionel Messi and Kylian Mbappe kind of mega final in the football, and I think we kind of get used to it sometimes. We just like, it needs to be exciting. Normally, finals are like 1-0 victories, or they're one-sided. What I think for this game, it just made it a bit of a shit spectacle. It wasn't entertaining. I think the tournament itself got the final that it deserved, was my view. And yeah, I think you're right. If they played on an absolute road, India probably win that game. But I thought that Australia marshaled their resources appropriately, used the pitch to their advantage, and didn't panic. I think sometimes it's easy to panic when you kind of think things are kind of going to be against you and all this kind of stuff. They just kind of got on with it, and we're just like, we'll do what the best we possibly can do. I also thought it was a bit of selfless cricket in it as well. For a World Cup final, you want to make a name for yourself. Like, when you're in that space, you want to be just like, I'm going to be the kind of poster person for this. What you saw from the Australian batters straight out of the blocks were David Warner. Can't believe I'm saying he's been selfless. Mitch Marsh, coming down the track, trying to put the bowlers off of their thing and try to be aggressive. And they knocked 40, 50 runs off in the first kind of 6 overs or so. And that made a massive difference to what they could then do in that space. And I think we were texting on WhatsApp on the Discord. So that actually that approach is exactly the right thing, right? What is the point in trying to survive against Shami and Bumrah? You might as well try and have a bit of a go for them and see what happens. What you saw was Shami melted a little bit under the pressure of it, and Bumrah got a little bit unlucky on a couple of occasions, but the ball squirted away for boundaries, and it made the chase far easier for Australia.
Yeah, I mean, Bumrah did bowl very, very well, and Shami bowled a few good balls, I would say. But Bumrah bowled 1 over to head, I think it was, and it was like every ball could have been a wicket. Like, he was unlucky not to take a fifer in that over. Like, it was just the ball whizzing past the outside edge. But they're the margins, aren't they? I don't know what else I have on this game. It wasn't actually that good, as you say, Ross.
Yeah, I've got another one. KL Rahul shit behind the stumps as well, wasn't he, today? Absolute awful bit of glovesmanship. Like, it was a bit difficult for him, but he didn't recover. He just didn't recover. And it was, it would have been nicer to see MS Dhoni behind the stumps, and I'm sure every India fan who's watching this would have been. Where was the substitute wicketkeeper? That's what I want to know.
Well, maybe that's the next step.
Should have feigned a concussion.
They go back to Dhoni for the next World Cup.
And they win.
Like, they're going to have to make some changes.
Imagine that. They literally go out, and then what that would be. You'd never hear the end of it. It'd be amazing.
I mean, on the one hand, it would be amazing, but on the other hand, as you say, you would never hear the end of it, and so maybe it's best that we park that idea and never come back to it. Never come back to it again. Max, did you have anything else on the game that you would like to talk about?
No, I think we've probably covered most things. I suppose there were lots of discussions. I mentioned sort of in the summary. Lots of people saying how brave Cummins was to make the call he did at the toss. I mean, I think it was an important toss to win. I think that's clear, given the difficulties with setting a total on a pitch that is slow. But I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's necessarily that brave a call, given what we've seen from the pitch in Ahmedabad and what people have done throughout this World Cup. I mean, was it there've been four games before this? There was England New Zealand at the start, where England sort of posted a total that looked okay, and then New Zealand chased it really comfortably. India rolled Pakistan over and chased it comfortably. England didn't chase it against Australia, but they won the toss and elected to field. I should say New Zealand and India both won the previous toss and elected to field. The only team that did opt to bat first was Afghanistan against South Africa, and they lost doing that. But Afghanistan have basically done that a few times, haven't they, in the World Cup? So I mean, I don't think it was necessarily a brave call. I think it was just the right call. I don't know if people is it the whole get a total on the board pressure of a final thing that people were reading into too much?
It is a thing. It's an observed thing that batting second is harder in knockout cricket. So there is an element of bravery. I do think on that pitch it was a bit of a no-brainer, though, to be perfectly honest. I think it was quite clear that that's what you should do. And to be fair to the Australians, they made another right decision, as Ross was saying earlier. That's the story of the World Cup. From
threw the ball to Maxwell in the power play, took a wicket. The wicket,
the wicket, the big wicket. And I think, like as another observation, I think some people, commentators included, were absolutely stunned that Australia won this cricket match, and I was a bit surprised by that. I thought this was, what do I say, 70%? Probably more like 60% in India's favour before the match. That's quite tight. Like, we're looking at two really good teams here. One of them made a few better decisions and took an amazing catch and had a batter go bonzo, and they won. That's how cricket works. It wasn't impossible. Australia have won in this World Cup. They played 11 games. They've won 9 of them. India played 11. They won 10 of them. Like, it's actually quite close between these two sides. And India, I think, probably are better, but actually quite an ordinary turn of events led to Australia winning the match. It wasn't extraordinary in any way, the game, was it? It was just sort of like a bit of a formality, really. Ross, you look like you're itching to say something.
Yeah, so your point around these two teams being great teams, right? And I think Australia have kind of like sneakily established a bit of a dynasty with some of the players in this team. Like, they'll go down as some like real Hall of Famers in terms of the trophy cabinet that they've got. And I think what's a real shame is that you're going to have some of the India players who are not going to be able to kind of get that accolade, and they're going to miss out on that. And that is a crying shame for some of the talent that's been on show. But this Australian lineup, look at like the things that they have gone and won, and the way in which they've gone about it. Yeah, that is. It's clinical. It's like the most. It's like there's positive stereotypes and there's negative stereotypes. There's a really bloody positive one around Australia of being able to win cricket games and win cricket tournaments, and they were ruthless. And I think when people talk about Cummins' captaincy and the whole Justin Langer event that happened when he got kind of booted out, etc., because of the player power, etc., all of that now has ultimately been vindicated by them lifting kind of the World Test Championship and winning this ODI thing as well. So I think that's quite a staggering thing for the players, and they probably haven't got the praise, especially from, say, English podcasts, English media, etc., that they probably deserve. And the India lineup, I think it's going to be quite sad for some of the players who now won't play in another World Cup, who are going to miss out on that opportunity. And what's going to be really challenging is who ends up being like a bit of a scapegoat for this. Like India, you've lost one cricket game against a really good Australia lineup. Then they've got some like Hall of Fame batters. They've got Hall of Fame bowlers in that lineup. They've had a guy who single-handedly batted on one leg to save them in one game. Right? There's so many things that you lose one game. Rohit Sharma might end up losing the captaincy because of some kind of knee-jerk kind of resignation. You might see some people retiring a year or two before they should really retire. And so I hope that this isn't a completely kind of mental disintegration of kind of India media pressure that results in something bad, because ultimately it's one game of cricket, and sometimes when you come up against Australia in a final, the odds aren't actually in your favour.
No, Australia are a winning machine. The T20 World Cup in there as well. I mean, like if you look across the world cricket, I think it is a really interesting rivalry. With just sort of another chapter in that. You'd say Australia and India are some way ahead of every other team. India might be a more consistent side, but Australia potentially able to hit higher peaks, and probably have the trophy cabinet to show for that. With those 3 wins. Like it was good. It was good. It was a good game. As you say, Ross, lots of legends. It was very funny when Steve Smith was out at LBW and didn't review it, even though he wasn't out. Like,
why did he review it? There's 2 reviews. He had 2
So
reviews.
bizarre.
And Steve Smith reviews everything, right? He's like, he's absolutely never thinks he's out.
And if there's one thing that Steve Smith does, it's get outside the line to negate LBW.
yeah,
Just forgot.
it was
weird.
It was astonishing. Maybe Hedge doesn't like him. Just like,
Maybe.
down, mate.
He was like, I want to bat with Marnus. He's my guy.
Yeah. Marnus will score slowly so I can score more runs, make myself look good, dominate this fight.
The only other thing to reflect on from an India perspective is I think we'd been complimenting them all the way through of how they've dealt with the loss of Hardik Pandya through an injury. Today, that was a Hardik game to play. Instead of a Suryakumar Yadav, having Hardik Pandya in at 6 in that setup, even if he couldn't bowl, even if he couldn't bowl, there was a bit there where I was sitting there going, India fans worldwide are wishing that Hardik Pandya was at the crease, not Sky today.
That's a fair point. Probably a good way to end it. Well done, Australia. Congratulations, Australia, for winning the World Cup. Is it their 5th World Cup?
6th.
I mean, there's only been about 12. 6th. There's only been about 12
6th.
World Cups. That's nuts. They're pretty good. They're pretty good, those boys.
Give someone else a go, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's stupid. Stop dominating the sport. Well done, Australia.
Yeah.
Well done, Cummins. Well done, Starc. Didn't even talk about Starc. He had a good game. We're done.
World
Cup
Jack,
coverage.
Can we just leave the podcast on just for like 2 minutes of just silence as an ode to the crowd at Ahmedabad, who literally didn't do anything after the 22nd or 23rd over. When any boundary was there, silence.
Yeah, it was nice. It was like a monastery, not really a cricket stadium. Cool. That is
Real
podcast.
respect
I
for
think
cricket on show, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think we've got one more World Cup show sometime this week. We're going to revisit our pre-tournament predictions. Max, I know that you've won. You predicted Australia would win the World Cup, and that is that's good for you. But we'll also have a look back at who we thought would be top run scorer. And
I don't think I've got anything else right. So
have you not? No. Well, Ross went for Babar Azam for most runs, so he's in trouble. I can't remember any of my picks. I came up with them on the spot, then immediately forgot. Should be quite a funny show to revisit, to be honest. And we'll talk about some of our highlights from the tournament. It was what it was. It's over now. And we move on to bilateral cricket, the stuff we really
true measure of a team.
Yeah, exactly. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And make sure you're subscribed so that you can catch up with us next time we do a show. Goodbye.